I'm Dr. Ronald Weiss, and I'm a physician. I'm board certified in internal medicine as well as lifestyle medicine. My tortuous plant-based journey began in the first decade of this century, about 2008, 2009, something like that. And it began after I read the China study. Even though I had known for 15 years prior to that, that a diet, a dedicated vegan diet of whole plant foods had the ability to reverse very serious illnesses, I spent about 15 years wandering around and not implementing that personally until I read the China study over a period of 3 nights, late into the night. And I closed the covers of that book and I decided that it was time for me to only eat plants.
What prevented you from doing it sooner, you think? I mean, it sounds like you knew it prior to that.
I knew it because I was the one who arranged for my father to eat a very strict macrobiotic diet when he was diagnosed with end-stage pancreatic cancer. For the first year that I was a practicing physician, when I was 30 years old. I'm now 62, so 32 years ago. And I stumbled across this. We saw that when I brought this diet to my father, set him up with the process to eat this way, all the guidance, whatever. And I ate it with him during this time. And during this time, his cancer shrunk by 50%, as documented on the CAT scans, serial CAT scans. But after his passing, I abandoned this way of eating, and I went back to my old way of eating, which was, how can I describe it? I would say it was plant-forward, which it always had been. It included a lot of vegetables, fruits, and whole plant foods, but there were animal foods in there, and there were junk foods in there. And I went back to that way from 1993 until about 2008 when I read the China study.
Now, would you say maybe it was social pressure? Was it just indifference, resisting the information?
I loved food. I was a foodie. I loved pastrami sandwiches from the 2nd Avenue Deli. I loved chicken parmesan. I loved these things. I loved sushi. I loved eating these foods. Cognitively, I couldn't wrap my head around not eating them, even though I'd seen this N=1, this one situation where my father, he had no other treatment. He didn't accept chemotherapy. He just stopped eating these foods and he only ate a high level of plants and his tumor shrunk. I brought that to him. I saw it happen. I saw the CAT scans. But after his situation was over and he passed, human beings have
resistance to change.
Well, yes. We are very resistant to change. And there's a beautiful saying that I always think about, and I think of myself in context to this, in relationship to this saying. It is so hard for people to change because they focus on what they have to lose instead of what they have to gain by the change, right? For 15 years, even though I knew all of this stuff, I kept focusing on, I can never have chicken parmesan ever again. I can never have a cheese pizza ever again. I can never go to the Carnegie Deli I can't, even though that was my father's favorite, we took him there when he was diagnosed with cancer. I can never do that again. Instead of, I don't ever have to get cancer like my father. I don't ever have to get a heart attack. And I kept thinking that way for 15 years. And when I read the China study by Colin Campbell, it came into such clear focus for me between the covers of that book that here I was on the precipice of the age of mortality, the age of morbidity and mortality. And this became most important to me. You know, when I was 30 years old, 32 years old, who gets cancer and a heart attack?
Older people. You're invincible.
Yeah, I'm immortal.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, you have some small children, your father is gone, and all of a sudden, the shadow of mortality is falling upon you. And I think I was in the right spot, in the right time, and I read this book, and I said to myself, I don't want to get cancer like my father. I'm not going to do this anymore. In the last chapter of the China study, I think it's the last chapter, Colin Campbell says, why don't you give it a shot? For a month, for 30 days, just eat plants. And I said, I will.
You alluded to potentially staving off cancer and heart disease. I mean, we're going to die of something still, though, right? Or this is not a panacea, right?
What you're alluding to is a common statement that is said by people, right, who cannot overcome and don't want to give up their unhealthy habits of food. You got to die of something, right? Cigarette smoking, you got to die of something. I mean, what difference does it make? That is true. None of us are immortal. I think there are two important considerations here. You don't want to have a shortened lifespan. An omnivorous diet or any kind of diet that's not a diet of whole plant foods shortens your life. It just does. We have the data. I want to live as long as I can. I don't want to spend the last segment of my life in a nursing home. I don't want to spend the last segment of my life, whether it be 10 years, 15 years, something like that, in assisted living or people having to assist me in living, my children having to take care of me. I would prefer not to be using aids to live, whether they be canes or wheelchairs or crutches. I don't want to do that because I imagine that it would degrade my quality of life. I don't want to be in a nursing home or have a feeding tube, or I just want to walk in the sunshine, hear the birds of this farm, look at the mountains, planting seeds, taking care of patients as long as I can until the last drop. And that's what I want to do. That's why I eat like this. Because I've seen in my patients who don't eat like this, they're disabled in the last chapter or so, or 2 or 3 of their life. I want not just the lifespan, I want a health span that covers that long lifespan. And I think those are the reasons for eating like this. Yes, I will eventually die, but I want to pass away quickly, without utilizing enormous resources like hospitals and nursing homes, without suffering, whether it be a significant amount of suffering over a long period of time. And I think in our current day, that's what happens to the average patient. I don't want that.
You know, there's people on the other side of the fence that are starting to emerge, and they're saying, well, maybe it's just the elimination of processed foods, and they're going on the extreme low carb to carnivore spectrum of things. They're experiencing some metabolic advantage, but it's my understanding maybe there's not enough evidence to support that in the long run. What do you think about that?
And I think we may later on talk about terminology or labels, which shift from day to day, right, or from year to year. You don't hear anyone talking about Atkins diet really very much. But remember, like 20 years ago, oh my God, everyone who ate like the kind of diet you just mentioned, it was called Atkins, right? There wasn't something called keto. The name didn't exist, or paleo. But basically what you're alluding to is a diet which has animal foods, but not processed animal foods, not necessarily hot dogs. Maybe it's just, it could even be organically produced, raw, just meat, grass grown. It could be organic, healthy sources, but whole foods that come from animals, like meat or chicken or eggs or milk or cheese or fish. Plus, most of these diets incorporate probably some vegetables because they're not very high in sugar and they're low in calories. They generally don't involve too many of the starches. When I say starches, I'm talking about grains and potatoes and legumes. And I didn't say none, but probably the spectrum, and it depends who you are. I don't know who's eating what these days, but they talk about low carb diets, and that's what I think you're getting to. The vegetables in this mindset are not thought about really as carbs. They think about carbs as starches, starch predominant foods like grains and potatoes and stuff like that, root vegetables. So it ends up being, I'm eating chicken, I'll eat some vegetables, I'll eat some meat, I'll eat some vegetables, maybe a little fruit, maybe here and there, I think. And that's basically the diet. I do see the patients who adopt this, and they do lose weight. Because previously they were eating a standard American diet, basically, which is processed and contaminated animal foods, processed and contaminated plant foods, like Oreo cookies, potato chips, and candy bars. Those are all plant foods too, right? You can say that they did make an improvement, and they will lose weight. They will. They may reverse their diabetes. Their sugars may go down. But ultimately, this diet will shorten their life in comparison to a diet of whole plant foods. And the reason why is because, many, almost too numerous to enumerate upon. But here are a few reasons why. It's because whole animal foods is not what our gut microbiome is looking for. A predominance of these foods in our diet is not what our gut microbiome is expecting. And our gut microbiome, at the end of the day, it will determine our health and our longevity. The trillions of organisms that live within our intestinal tract expect whole plant fibers, whole plant foods. We evolved over millions of years that way. That's what it's expecting. How do I know this? Because from archaeological sites, from paleo people, from prehistoric people, where they've excavated their caves, cave people, they found their stools. They're fossilized. And when they analyze these stools, it is calculated that these people ate 100 plus grams of fiber per day based on the fiber content of these stools. Now these were cave people. They hadn't started farming yet. They were hunter-gatherers, right? They did hunt some, but they gathered more apparently because their stools showed they were eating an average of 100 plus grams of fiber a day. On my best days, I'm eating 60. 60 grams. Maybe if I tried 70 grams. Because I have to work too. I have to be a doctor. I have to do things. My whole day is not consumed by walking through the forest, digging up roots, and I have to do things, other things. So,
but you love doing those.
I do love doing those things. But just to show you, 60 grams, let's say, on a good day, The average American eats 15 grams, 1/5, or less. It is thought that probably in order to begin to reverse diseases and to begin to be healthy, you need at least 40 grams. And in general, optimal to maintain yourself, 60 grams. At the end of the day, it will all boil down to, with these whole animal food eaters who eat low carb diets, how many grams of fiber are they eating per day? And what I'm trying to tell you is if they are eating significant amounts of animal foods which have 0 fiber in them, and if that is the main course on their plate, they can't possibly be getting up to the minimum of 40 grams of fiber per day. Even if they're including vegetables in their dietary plan, they can't. And you know why that is? It's because of all the plants on our plate, it's not vegetables that have the most whole plant fibers. It's whole grains and it's legumes. It's the starches that have the most fiber content. Because you have to remember, they're fairly dry. If you take the weight of a bean or a whole grain, there's not a lot of water weight in there. It's mostly fiber. If you take the weight of a tomato or a vegetable like a piece of kale, it's mostly water. The fiber component of it for all the volume and mass you're eating is much less substantial than a whole starch like a bean or a grain. And so that's the way it works out. I think eventually over our lives we need that high level of whole fiber content from whole plants in order to get to that health span and lifespan over the long term. In the short term, will you lose weight? Yeah. By eating some whole animal foods, will you lose, your sugars will go down? Yes. But the animal foods you are eating that cause cancer take many decades to develop. The animals foods that you are eating that will increase your cholesterol take many decades to clog up your arteries and then give you Alzheimer's and heart attacks. That will come later.
I interviewed Martika Heener, PhD in nutrition, quite a few years ago. She said she thinks fiber will eventually become an essential nutrient. But right now it's not, and some people in the comment section say, well, it's not even essential.
It is very essential.
I mean, according to the National Academy of Sciences or something.
You can see where this is going.
Yeah.
Because when I was in medical school 35 years ago, or 6, 7 years ago, I'm losing count. Here's what they taught us about the colon. It's basically a tube, and you have stool in it. Its purpose is to absorb water and secrete water, is water balance based on what your body, the stool consistency, what you need to have down there to have proper stools, and electrolyte transfer, like potassium and sodium and other electrolytes go back and forth based on your needs, what your body needs, and that's all. Today, the microbiome is its own organism. They taught me there were bacteria down there, but they had no relevance to our health. We didn't even know what their purpose was or why they were important. We now know, as I said, that these bacteria, there's an ecosystem that determines our health, and it and of itself is so powerful, it's its own organ within the organ of the colon. That's why I agree with what you're saying about fiber being an essential nutrient, because that ecosystem is driven by whole plant fibers. There's nothing else. And animal foods have no fiber. Only plants have whole fibers. That's it.
Now, speaking of essential nutrients and the RDAs, I'm curious, do you think they are applicable to people who are eating this way? That is a whole food vegan diet or a whole food diet consisting of legumes, greens, grains, fruits, veggies, mushrooms, nuts, seeds, herbs, and spices. Is it applicable to us since those RDAs are based on the average normal person who isn't eating this way? Is there any kind of concern there that maybe some of those goals, like those micro and macronutrient targets, are not really as relevant to somebody like us?
I don't know. It's a mixed bag. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I think that there's value to these guidelines, and other times I don't. And because what you're saying should be thought about. Like, for example, the recommendations for protein intake, right? It's recommended that the average, I guess, more sedentary and not athletic kind of adult woman should have 45 grams of protein and 55 if you're a male. That's a good floor for a minimum, but it's not necessarily optimal. If you look at the average American male, they're getting like 130 or 140 grams of protein because of the excesses of the American diet. And women, 110 to 120 grams of protein, way over what's recommended, right? But on the other hand, we're beginning to appreciate that if you get older, you may need more protein than that 45 or 55 grams that's recommended for women and men. If you want to try to keep your muscle mass and bone density, you probably need more than that. So I take these recommendations with a grain of salt, no pun intended. There's some recommendations that are for guidelines that are in conflict or uncertain, like, for example, vitamin D. It's not clear. They're all different kinds of opinions of what you should have based on different kinds of information that we have. And I personally don't believe like the current vitamin D recommendation is adequate. It's recommended that people get 1,200 milligrams of calcium a day. It's thought that that's too much now in some quarters. The European Union's it's too much according to the European Union's recommendation, which is like 700. What we're beginning to learn in more recent years is that you shouldn't look for, as Colin Campbell says, you shouldn't go and look for these isolated parameters to guide your life, like, oh my God, how much calcium did I eat today? You should instead look at the symphony of nutrition, and you should just eat a diet of whole plant foods. And if you do that, which is a high level and is carefully thought about and planned, you will get everything you need and don't worry about that. Nice. Now, there are some caveats to that. I don't worry about vitamin D. I don't worry about zinc, at least at this time, and who knows, maybe the science someday will show me otherwise, but I don't this time. I don't worry about how much vitamin C I'm getting. I don't worry about how much folate I'm getting. I don't worry about these things. I do worry about iodine a little bit. I do, because of my clinical experience, because in my practice, we specifically tell people not to eat table salt, which is iodized. And when they adhere to these recommendations, we notice that I check iodine in them and it can become nil. And I've had examples of where people had hypothyroidism, and when we gave them some iodine, because they were eating whole plant food diet, when we gave them some iodine in the form of seaweed, like dulse or arame or nori sheets, their iodine went up. So that's what I mean. You have to be very planful and strategic as to what you are eating. I do think it's possible to get what you need, but it has to be in a complete Beethoven symphony. You can't have like a movement of it or something that's less. There are 3 areas where you may not be able to get very important nutrients, and that's B12. B12, no matter what you do to eat natural whole plant foods, B12 is not coming from there. It's made from bacteria. So I tell patients to take a B12 supplement. Vitamin D does not come from food. It comes from us going out in the sun when the sun shines on our skin, and vitamin D is manufactured. Because a lot of us don't do that anymore, and sometimes it's dangerous for us to do it because it can age our skin and give us skin cancer. I have people taking general recommendation for vitamin D. I usually look into patients and consider their omega-3 long-chain fat complement in their body, because there is a growing trove of data that that's important to safeguard our cognitive abilities and memory as we get older. Although sometimes it's available by eating whole plant foods, it's not always. It's available by eating fish. But because I tell people not to eat fish, because of many reasons, ask me why, I look into this and I try to get them to eat whole plants first that can build up their omega-3s, and if they can't, then I give them a supplement.
Yeah. Now, as far as you saying you can't get them from plants, you can actually get them
in whole plants, like flaxseed, chia seed, hemp seed, walnuts. You can. But what I've noticed from my observations of patients over many years, sometimes that doesn't work either.
Well, how are you testing for that?
I test their levels in their blood. I spend a year with every patient having them eat the optimal amounts of those plants to get their index as high as possible. And some patients make it and some patients don't.
How do you know that test is a reliable reflection of what's going on in the brain?
I can't tell you it's a reliable reflection. You know, I can't take a piece of their brain out. I can't do that. I don't want to lose my medical license. But you can only do the best you can in this day with the knowledge we have. Right? Every day is imperfect. And all we can tell is that I have come to this point from the information we do have, and that's what I'm working with. And that's blood tests.
As far as seaweeds you mentioned, and I'm so glad you mentioned that, because probably an important staple to get in our diet on a regular basis. But somebody has raised concerns in the comment section recently, actually, of them being contaminated. When I looked into it more, there was a lot of concerns about contamination in seaweeds. And so I'm curious if you've thought about that much or had that issue, or maybe we're not eating enough for it to be an issue. Or
the contamination of the world is a growing problem. And that's why we are here. That's why I came to this farm in the first place, to try and think in a different way, to repair the world, because we are contaminating it. And it will get more and more contaminated unless we change our course. How contaminated? Who knows? I don't have a laboratory where I'm testing every single food, but as the years go on, we are seeing more and more contamination arise. It's not only in seaweed, organic oregano, organic apples, organic carrots, organic kale, things that are, it's more so in non-organic materials. Where do you stop? Chocolate with heavy metals, rice with arsenic. Where do you stop? What do you eat? What are you not going to eat anything and just drink reverse osmosis filtered water? You have to eat. So you do the best you can. And I think that, look, oregano, organic oregano is contaminated with heavy metals, all the commercial sources of it, as assessed by Consumer Reports. Should I eat an iodine pill instead of taking a teaspoon of seaweed flakes? I don't know. Who grew the aramay? Who grew I don't know. I have more things to do in life, and I can't spend them on thinking about sources and contaminations. I try to practically do the best I can. If I can grow my own oregano, which we can, I do it. And I know that my soil doesn't have lead or arsenic in it, because I tested it, and it doesn't have cadmium, and I eat that oregano. But if I have none of that left, I worry when I sprinkle that oregano with cadmium on it, let me see, but I eat it.
Well, you mentioned fish earlier. Fish get their omegas from algae and seaweeds, so they're not really a source that created it. But that fatty flesh bioaccumulates to those environmental toxins. So when we eat animals, I suppose it's even worse.
Yes, that's one of the things that makes, from a pollutant standpoint, it's one of the things that makes eating animal foods so much more dangerous than eating plant foods. And that process is called biomagnification, where you're going up the food chain in evolutionary capacity, right? In complexity of life. Well, maybe I shouldn't say that animals are more complex than plants, because plants are pretty complex. They're different though, but usually animals eat plants, and it's usually not the other way around, except for a couple. A little shop of horrors. In any event, as you eat lower echelon or tier organisms, and eventually as you get to the top organism, because we as human beings in this planet, we eat everything that there is, the contamination from each lower organism is cumulative, so it all ends up in you. And you can go down lower, if a fish eats a smaller fish, which before that ate a smaller fish, and that ate a tiny little brine-ish phytoplankton, which ate an algae, all that accumulation builds up. So that's why what you're saying is true. And the most egregious pollutants build up in fat. Even if I find people who are coming in to me who are taking fish oils, I tell them at least change to green algae oil, because, but they say that this is refined, Dr. Weiss. It's like Lavazza, and they refine the pollutants. Don't believe it. There is so much pollution in there, and so many, because it's fat. I wouldn't trust them. Who's regulating them? They get this pollutants out of the fat. And yeah, I eat low down on the food chain, plants. And so that's why I like doing that for the omega-3 needs.
Cool.
And if we can't get there by eating whole plants, I tell patients to take green algae oil that's manufactured in a laboratory without pollutants.
Third-party testing.
Supposedly, yeah. I have difficulty with my colleagues in the medical field, especially, I am an internist, and my professional organization as an internist is the American College of Physicians. It's one of the leading doctors' organizations in the United States. The American College of Physicians and their allied companions, like the American College of Cardiology and other professional organizations, recommend a Mediterranean diet for Americans to become healthy. And why do they recommend that? Because it contains fish. I guess it's healthier for you than eating the standard American diet, which is hamburgers that come from CAFOs, concentrated animal fooding operations, which are highly contaminated. And studies have shown that it is, but eating the Mediterranean diet, which contains fish, is a heart attackogenic diet. It causes heart attacks. 1/3 less than eating a Western standard diet, but a diet where you don't eat fish at all and eat whole plant foods causes no heart attacks. That's why I say, we shouldn't eat fish anymore. And for health reasons, we shouldn't eat fish for the ultimate health reason, which is not our own individual health, but the health of our children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren, because the oceans are being industrially mined in order to get us that fish for the Mediterranean diet. And our oceans are collapsing. You cannot mine wildlife. We are mining wildlife, and it's collapsing. And we can't do that anymore. And the UN Oceanographic or Marine Organization of Scientists have estimated that by 2050, on the trajectory we're going, 1/3 of all ocean species will be extinct. When that happens, even if you don't eat fish and you only eat meat, the oceans will cease to control our environment. They will not be able to control the climate and other aspects of our world. And then things will not turn out well. So we should stop taking fish out of the ocean. And by the way, can I add one more thing?
Yeah.
Don't eat farmed fish either.
The fatty acid ratio gets all out of skew.
They're highly contaminated. If you don't want to get cancer and you want less microplastics, farmed fish are being fed the waste of industrialized animal feeding operation. You don't want that. That's just highly toxic. And the fish farms are destroying the ecology of our oceans. They're very destructive. They cause enormous amounts of pollution in our ocean environment. That's not a way to go. And of course, we haven't talked about the ethical considerations beyond the ethical environment considerations, if you'd like to talk about that.
Yeah, definitely. Because they are sentient.
Yeah, to me, we have been talking about the ethical considerations. It is my responsibility, because I decided and my wife decided to have children, I need to act to preserve the mothership for them. And their desires, their wants or desires are to have children. I can't use up all the resources. Why should I do that? It's selfish. That's an ethical consideration. But there are other ethical considerations, and those deal with the realization that as human beings, we are only part of an entire ecosystem that rich, complex of relationships with other living and non-living things. We do not have the right to disrupt other beings' existence and relationship within that entire network. We don't have the right. Rocks are not sentient that we know of. Plants, they are sentient to some degree, but they don't have nervous systems that we know of. But then you get to animals, the animal kingdom, and most of the animals we are familiar with are sentient. And I think that's yet another consideration, that an organism that is aware of its environment and has feelings and thoughts and nurtures children, offspring, can sense joy and take in other appreciations within themselves and outside of themselves. I think it's unethical to, at this point, and it took me a long time to get here. That was part of my journey. I don't think it's right to deprive them of these things, because we enjoy these things, and I don't think it's right to deprive others. Do unto yourself, right? Yeah. Or do unto your neighbor as you would expect your neighbor to do unto you.
Sounds like you've embraced the moral obligation and realized that there is no significantly morally relevant difference between their experience and ours.
And especially because we need them to exist in order for us to exist. If you only look at it from a purely selfish standpoint, it kind of twists different moral considerations together, right? Let's say I don't really care that they're sentient and they can feel things or think or care about their offspring, but I only care about my offspring. Screw them. I only care about my children and their well-being. Well, you'd better care about them, because when they're gone, your children, my children, won't have a world to live in.
Speaking of children, considering that this appears to be, for so many reasons, the most protective way to reduce risk of chronic disease, all-cause mortality, the future of the entire planet, all living creatures on this planet, and how they interact in ecosystems and dynamically depend on each other. Considering all of these variables, and that a well-planned vegan diet seems to be most protective of all these things, doesn't it seem like the default way of eating therefore should be this way of eating and raising our children this way?
It absolutely should. It should be the default way of eating. And we see certain organizations slowly evolving towards what you're saying. What do I mean by that? Well, before I talked about the American College of Physicians, right, and doctors group. Generally speaking, the medical doctors groups generally recommend a Mediterranean style way of eating. The Mediterranean style of eating, by definition, is plant heavy. The kind they're recommending is not vegan, but it has a significant component of plants in it. Well, look, when I went to medical school, this didn't even exist.
Yeah, it's moving in this direction.
Yeah, so it is more plants. Let's not start to go to what the USDA recommends, because the federal government is so fraught with complicated pressures from vested interests that they can't move very well. I am glad that at least the medical doctors have come to that, but the problem is it's not enough. Walter Willett, who is a friend of mine and who is emeritus board member of this farm, of Ethos Farm to Health, is the primary author and leader of the Eat Lancet study. The Eat Lancet is an evaluation that has been conducted and is currently ongoing as well, of what kind of diet, and this evaluation is being conducted by 38 or 40 or I don't know what it's up to, 50 of the world's leading scientists. What diet should we eat in order for the following things to happen? For us to be healthy, for us to not pollute the world, for us to be sustainable so that by the time we get to 2050, when there's supposed to be 10 billion people on the planet, we cannot be starving to death. And most importantly, what do we need to be eating to remain within planetary boundaries so that we don't destroy the mothership? And the answer is a plant-based diet. Now, because of cultural considerations and attitudes, did not say a vegan diet. Yeah. But it is very clear from the research, let me put it this way, that the more plants the world eats, the better off we will be. It's very, very clear.
Now, as far as children are concerned, though, do you have any reason to doubt that this is the best way to raise children?
No, because, before I had this epiphany that I discussed mentioned in the beginning, our children were born already. And they were young when we decided to go on our plant-based journey. But I know now that it's best to start your plant-based life with the mother, before conception. So the mother, to not eat fish for years before you get pregnant, so you don't have heavy metals in your body that you pass on to the developing embryo. Or you can reduce your ingestion of environmental pollutants that will affect the embryo's development. The sooner the better. Children that are here with us, getting them to appreciate from the earliest point of what food is and what food isn't, it makes them who they are in life. It's hard once someone has been taught to eat animal foods. It's hard to get them not to eat them. Or foods that are high in sugar or salt. It's very hard because these things are highly addictive. Look at my situation, right? I knew the information. I was a doctor. I saw the CAT scans and I still couldn't get away from it, even though I knew what their power was, because I was trapped within myself. So I think the best thing is, from before a child is born, to start on the way you want to go. And then as far as anything lacking, there is nothing lacking that a child would need for development into a healthy adult. Just make sure they have enough of those 3 things I talked about. The B12, the vitamin D, which doesn't come from food anyway. B12 does. And the omega-3s. And you will have a healthy child, adult, and so on and so forth.
You mentioned addiction and culture quite a few times. Now that you've gotten away from it for so long, do you miss any of these foods? Or have you been able to find an increased array of ways to compensate, or maybe a more vastly tantalizing palate, sophisticated palate has developed in such case that now those other foods that you used to crave are now kind of repulsive at all? Or is there anything like that going on? Like how is your disposition now compared to then changed?
I think that, and just so your audience understands, foods are the most addictive substances to humans on the face of the earth. And the reason why is they're highly insidious. You know when someone puts a crack pipe in front of you, or cigarettes, or cocaine, alcohol, but you don't know necessarily, or it's not been broadcast, or we've not been taught that there are highly addictive components of the foods we eat. And because we're not aware of it, we're kind of so attached to them. And that was my story, right? For 15 years. I didn't understand. It's not that what my father did wasn't so powerful. It was a teaching moment. But because I didn't understand how trapped I was by these foods, I couldn't leave them. When I had that epiphany, on those 3 nights while I'm reading the China study, and then over the many years that went on, I began to learn these things. What I learned is this, that just like someone who was smoking cigarettes for a long time and struggled to give them up, and eventually did, just like an alcoholic who can't give up alcohol but finally does and is in recovery, or any other well-known substance of abuse, you remain in recovery. I am in recovery. I'm in recovery. And that's why, besides the many, many reasons why I wouldn't want to eat a piece of chicken parmesan, all the kinds of things we've been talking about, which have begun to filter into my life. And I see everything is so richly woven together now. Let's say I didn't have those realizations. And all I knew is that I was addicted to that chicken parmesan with the melty cheese. I wouldn't want to have it because just like someone who is an alcoholic wouldn't want to have at a party 1 beer or a shot of scotch, because I know what's going to happen. It's going to drag me back again. And I don't want to be there. I don't want to be there. So, my personal kryptonite, my crack or my cigarette or my alcohol, it was pizza. You could put a plate of filet mignon in front of me, I don't really care. You could put an ice cream sundae. I mean, in my old life, I did eat those things once in a while, not every day, and I did enjoy them. Once I became plant-based, it wasn't a thing for me. Pizza was a thing for me. Even in my early plant-based journey that we talked about when I began, I continued to struggle with that. I was eating plants. I would eat only plants and I'd be vegan, and then I would fall back. And it took a while to figure that out.
Like over the course of maybe the first year or something?
With pizza itself?
Or yeah, I guess, yeah.
Maybe a couple of years, 2 years.
That's why it's kind of maybe hard to pin down the exact year, maybe.
Yeah. I would say, life is very complicated. Life is very complicated. I would say the last time I knowingly had any animal product at all, when we would go on the Sabbath for I am Jewish. And we would have the Sabbath meal Friday nights at my family's home. My relatives, we would traditionally go there for many years. And the only thing I would have, because it was so deeply
ingrained in your family.
Not only ingrained, ingrained is not the right word. It's such a deep connection to who I am as a person and a Jewish person. I would have a little piece of challah. Challah is bread which has a little egg in it. I think an entire challah has maybe an egg or 2 eggs. And when we would say the prayer over thanking, God for bread, I would have a little piece of that. Even though I ate everything else was plants all the time.
It's like a drop of an egg.
Yeah. And then for many years before that, and this is another story, my daughter, Rosie, had become strictly vegan at the age of 7.
Nice.
After an event on this farm. For years, she would sit at that table, and the challah is beautiful, and it was fresh baked that day. It was warm from the oven. This beautiful sunset, and everyone is singing, whatever. As a child, she'd be the only one sitting there, and she would refuse it.
Wow.
And all the adults, including me, would take this and eat it. And then one day, I looked at her sitting there, and I said, I shouldn't eat it either.
That's beautiful. Wow.
If this little girl has done this for all these years, why am I eating this?
Yeah. I sense so many emotions in you around that. And earlier there was a time or two. And even here at this event, Farm Days, when you get on stage, it's very deep. I mean, the emotions that come out of you are some of the deepest I've ever experienced around somebody. This means so much to you, doesn't it?
It does.
What would you like to see happen most? More than anything.
Kindness. Just be kind. If we can remember every day to be kind to everything and everyone in our world, we will be in a different place.
Making me think of Brian Johnson who sold Venmo for $800 million and can do anything he wants. He decides he wants to live as long as possible, and he's doing everything in his power to figure that out. And he's vegan, and he says he thinks the more intelligent a culture evolves to be, the more compassionate they become. So I think there's hope for that.
Well, we must have hope for it, even though these are some of the darkest days I've ever lived through in my life. I mean, I'm just trying to think back. It's hard to tell because it was different kind of darkness. Like when I was in grade school and junior high school, I remember thinking that I would not end my life. Like I thought with the nuclear threat from the Soviet Union, I thought I wasn't going to have a natural ending. I thought that we would destroy one another, the Soviet Union, the United States, and the world. And it's so interesting. One of my favorite films, especially documentary films, is a film called The Fog of War. And it is about the life of James McNamara, who was the Secretary of Defense in the 1960s when we were in Vietnam. And also, starting from JFK's administration. I remember him saying in this film, so he knew everything about the threat, about the nuclear threat that humanity faced. And he was, a rather stoic or reserved figure. And I remember him saying in this film, he said, "You have no idea. Nobody has any idea of how close we actually came. The planet came to annihilation. The things you were reading in the newspapers on the news didn't come close." He said, "I could not sleep at night. We came so close." So I think about that. And I think about where we are today. And I think that kindness is the antidote, you know. It is the prescription. Because I'm a doctor, and when I think about the people or the figures that we think about in our lives who model kindness or should represent the ideal of kindness or be a personification or demonstration of kindness: the physician, the priest, the rabbi, the imam, the minister,
The parent.
the mother, the father, the teacher, your teacher, a nurse. When I think of, and there are many others,
The police officer.
the police officer, the firefighter, you can go on. But when you think about, I know each of us know examples of these professionals in our life that have shown each of us kindness in a very special way. And we should just try to emulate them and be like them.
Now, we talked about trophic levels earlier, essentially when you were saying, you know, eating lower on the food chain, we're higher or up there because we eat everything. And here on your farm, you're doing such a unique thing, bringing farm to clinic and kind of, well, going both ways with that. It comes with a lot of challenges. And our agricultural system has been tainted with being such a big industry, trying to produce so much food for so many people, doing it in the most efficient way, the most viable whatever, securing jobs in this business as usual pattern. We've gotten ourselves into quite the dilemma, you know, between depending so heavily on like chemicals and animals, and I think what you're doing here is perhaps one of the most brilliant and beautiful and quintessential things for progress that I've probably encountered in all my hundreds of interviews, because it's so comprehensive and so at the core of what needs to happen moving forward. And you know, you've taken me on a tour of your farm a couple of times and talked about some of the challenges that you experience. Ultimately, I feel like with my simple understanding of trophic levels, plants will always be the most abundant food source as producers. They will always be the most sustainable, but they still come with so many challenges. And I think you're trying to find ways to overcome those challenges. Do you think you'll ever need to depend on animal inputs or chemicals, or are you able to find ways around that? And are you at the cusp of doing that, or have you already done that? How productive are you here? You know, just kind of questions along those lines. Where are you at with all that?
How many days do you have?
Executive summary.
A good life has a good journey. We need to all evolve and become a little bit better each day. I think on our walk, we walked past this field, our former composting field, how we were taking horse manure from a neighboring farm across the river so the manure wouldn't run into the water and contaminate the river, the Raritan, where people drink downstream. So we thought that was a good idea to take that and compost it to restore our soils. We stopped doing it. We worked very hard and very long on that. Years. A, because it wasn't sustainable. It was just, we couldn't, it wasn't feasible to do it any longer. It was too much. It took too much labor. It couldn't continue to do it. And it eventually failed, that process. You know, as time goes on, you learn new things. Just like I learned as a doctor that, you know, that I can help not only when someone comes with hypertension, I initially thought, well, I got to give them these pills so they don't have a stroke. And now I think I have to remove these pills that someone else put on and supplant them with whole plant foods, so not only do they not have a stroke, but they don't get cancer. In the same way. It's the same way I'm traveling now. And the project I'm working now with fertility, and we are working on this farm, to replace that is something called the Johnson-Su bioreactor. It is small, maybe 4 foot in diameter by 6 feet tall, sort of mesh enclosed container that makes a highly potent and fungal rich compost that has no animal inputs in it, no manure, none. And according to its inventors, Dr. Johnson and Dr. Su from New Mexico State University, who are microbiologists, that it has the best living materials to regenerate land and soil with. Because in their research, what they found is in this most concentrated and powerful compost, it didn't matter. It didn't matter whether you had manure or not. It didn't matter if you had animal waste. And there is growing research on this direction. Whereas the traditional accepted wisdom in regenerative and organic food production and agriculture is that animal manures give special power and fertility. And when you apply them, it helps you to grow excellent food, and you don't need, which is free of disease, and maybe even weeds. So you don't need to use chemicals. You don't need it. And of course, those foods are superior in their health providing nutrition. We know that. So that's the conventional and common wisdom that exists, but we're beginning to think maybe that's not necessarily so.
How might it be evolving in this new direction?
There's so little we know about the world we live in. This is why I can't understand why billionaires are spending their lives and times, their time, life, effort, trying to go to other planets and into space. What we need to save ourselves is to figure out what are the bacteria in soil underneath our feet. That's what we should know. We don't know. We're starting to look now. We don't know. What are the bacteria in ourselves? We're starting to look now. I mean, we've been looking for about 10 years, but we're really behind. And develop the techniques and the science in order to know this and get this information and utilize it to benefit ourselves and the planet. We're finding out every day, more and more. But we should pick up the pace.
It's interesting you brought up Colin Campbell earlier, and his whole approach, instead of being like a reductionist and micromanaging your nutrients and getting all neurotic there, I guess the same can be said for the soil. There's so many similarities, between what we used to think and what we're now realizing. Is that the case with the soil? Because you're just using like leftover leaves and whatever, and it's not as complicated maybe as it used to be. I don't know.
That's the lesson of the Johnson-Su bioreactor.
Yeah.
That no matter, and remember what I told you, that Dr. Johnson and Dr. Su, they're microbiologists. And this is what they found. That no matter what materials you use, whether they be leftover leaves, some grass clippings that you put, you need a variety of materials, maybe a handful of different ones, wood chips, whatever, hay, some straw, whatever you use. You could use animal manures, but you don't have to. No matter where you get them from, No matter if you're in Canada or Mexico or China or Australia or Europe, at the end of the day, after everything is composted, they have all the same organisms.
Wow.
No matter where they are. They have bacteria that were from the Antarctica. They have bacteria from their universal citizens. And it didn't matter.
It's still the same.
It's still the same.
Minerals.
Yes. Well, the most important thing about compost is the living component of it. Okay. That's what's most important. The minerals are in the soil for the large part. They're in rocks. The most important thing is the living organisms, the components that are in that compost, that amendment. And then if they're right, they can go into the soil and break down the rocks. So you can extract the minerals that are in the soil, right? And so the plants can have them. And so then you can have the minerals in the plants. That's generally the way it works.
Nice. You know, after hanging out with you some over the last week and hearing you talk, it sounds like this is as important to you as anything else, the health of the soil. And you've had people here from different walks of, you know, this industry, like Mary Berry and different people, Bob Quinn in the past. And together we're all learning, and it's just so interesting that you bring these different approaches together here. And to me, that's just phenomenal, and it's a beautiful thing. And do you feel hopeful experiencing them coming here?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And having Mary Berry represent the Berry Center and the Berry family's life's work was particularly meaningful to us here. And it's because the work we do here, day in and day out, whether it's me seeing patients or the farmers growing food, is what we like to call, it is a human scaled. It is the antithesis of an industrial process, whether it be the medical industrial process or the food industrial or agricultural process. And this was, to me, this was the central theme of having Mary Berry here. Ultimately, if we are going to survive as a species overall, we have to know when something is enough. What is enough? When do we have enough? And to continue to seek objectives that are not good for us or our future or the planet's future, whether they be growing food with chemicals because you don't need as many people to grow them, or replacing those people with AI and machine, the few people you have left, or doing the same thing in healthcare or other areas of our life. I think we should think about these things, because at the end of the day, what are we here for? Why are we here? It is not to sit in a room and let machines and chemicals and AI do everything we need to have done for us. That's not why. We're here to experience the beautiful world around us.
Now, as far as lifestyle medicine is concerned, you know, the 6 pillars, you have a 7th pillar, don't you?
We do.
What is that?
The 7th pillar is the connection to the natural world. As I mentioned earlier, human beings, we're just one small biotic factor in the overall planetary ecosystem. There are other biotic living and non-biotic, non-living factors. Birds, dogs, caterpillars, non-living, rocks, rivers, the sky, living, trees, earthworms, and all of us depend on one another to make this beautiful world.
The other 6 aren't enough, are they?
They're not enough because we're not paying attention to our support system. And if that goes, the prior 6 don't matter.
Yeah.
We have to attend to our relationships, not only to other human beings, but to the bacteria in the soil and the fungi in the soil, which then become the bacteria in us, to the rain in the sky, which is becoming filled with pesticides, to the oceans, which regulate our climate, which, if it's not regulated, we will perish from heat and climate-related catastrophes. It kind of all eventually comes down to our health, that 7th pillar.
Yeah.
And it's a very powerful connection, but it's not obvious.
I've always been fascinated with the 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine, and I really appreciate this 7th one. I kind of added one, and it being love. If you're unhappy, if you're sad, like you're going to try to eat healthy, exercise, get good sleep, and all these things. And to me, one of the most powerful ways to get that love component in there, the center of the hub of it all, it's kind of like you saying kindness earlier. To get that, the social component needs to really be there. And in our culture, we're really lacking in that community-based thing. And I wonder if maybe smaller farming practices is a way to bring communities together. Food, not lawns, things like those kind of initiatives, and how maybe that can all integrate what you're talking about here into this as well.
Absolutely. Well, the reason why I love lifestyle medicine is I've been thinking about it for years now, what lifestyle medicine is. And I do believe, as laid out, of the 6 pillars, which are whole food, plant-based nutrition, eating plants, the realm of sleep, fitness and movement, human movement, the avoidance of things that are harmful, that can harm you, stress management, and the last one, and not in any particular order, connection. It's social connection. And within that social connection, many people would argue is love. Love and kindness, because that's the way, we are very social human beings. You can feed everyone 16 ounces of raw kale that's organically grown every day. They could sleep 8 hours a day and they can exercise. But if you put that person into solitary confinement, they will die. None of the others matter. And the same thing is true for stress management. You can have all the food you want, they're all necessary for us to live. I would argue that, and most people elite physicians in our movement accept that love and kindness dwells within that pillar of social or human connection. And for a while, I have gone back and forth and thought, well, maybe connection to the natural world should be in there too, because it's just connection. But that specifically is connection, human connection. The connection to the natural world or our ecosystem is connection to other non-human all the other human forms that are part of our reciprocal relation that we're supposed to be having. So that's why I set it aside in its own pillar.
I'm just trying to tie it all together because I've been thinking about the 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine a lot, and just wondering, even thinking about what you're doing here and how bringing farming to community might enhance that social connection.
Yeah, and absolutely. And that's what the life of the berries have tried to demonstrate, and what has been lost. And especially here in my beautiful state of New Jersey, which was an agricultural state, which had when I was growing up even, had ancient agricultural communities that were still intact, where there was a center of town, and there was a church in there, and a farmer's market, and you would eat, and there were social services that were provided by the community members, and everyone knew their neighbors, and you would help each other. It's going, because our rural landscapes have fallen asunder, and that's because agriculture has changed. And with that, the communities that agriculture supported are falling apart. So I like what you're saying. we're trying to go in the opposite direction. Not only are we attending in our daily practices the farmer in the field to human scaled activities, like instead of spraying chemicals on something to do the work, instead of drawing big machines to do the work, we do the work. Yeah. In my practice, instead of getting a lot of x-rays and MRIs or using hospitals or operating rooms to do the work, pills, I just talk to somebody. And I touch them, sitting on a chair. I do the work. We do the work, human scale. And likewise, when we have farm days here, we invite people onto this farm and invite the community here and feed them. Those connections are formed, and then that's the basis of the community. Food is a powerful basis to build connections and community. And yes, I think it's the beginning of regeneration of our community.
Now, what kind of services do you offer here, and how do you bring the community in here? It's my understanding you do an open house or something along those lines, like periodically, and you go out in the community to speak at a grocery store or something, or wherever you can. So in what ways? Delineate those.
Oh, there are many ways.
Yeah.
We try to, I think people like farms. I know that people in New Jersey like farms because the New Jerseyans have spent untold millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, I don't know how much, to preserve their farms so they're permanently preserved. So we have them. And this is one of them. I will go off the farm. I will go to grocery stores. I will go to churches. I will go to synagogues. I will go to schools. I will go to conventions to speak with the farmers and to educate people and to build community. But our favorite place is here on the farm because it's so beautiful. And this farm was preserved by the people, right? The people of this town and New Jersey, in Morris County in New Jersey. So that's why we have offerings on the farm. Like I do a monthly walk-in talk where we pick the subject that is designated by the Department of Health and Human Services, the U.S. Department, and they pick a health topic every month, and then I talk about it. And we ask the public to come in so we can educate on them on that health topic. This month it happens to be cholesterol. And I'm giving a farm walk-in talk where we'll walk across the farm. And we'll talk about cholesterol, but we'll talk about the farm too, and see how they connect. That's a popular one. Our farm market, which is open every weekend on Fridays and Saturdays at this point through the growing season, which is roughly currently April through Thanksgiving or a little after that, generally speaking. Hundreds of people come on a Friday or a Saturday to experience each other, the connection to the land, the connection to the people who are feeding them, who are our farmers. It's very profound when you walk in that farm market. It's different than going to a supermarket grocery store. The customers who are coming there are actually having conversations with their farmers, not only about what is this specific variety and why did you grow it and why am I eating it, and how are its flavor profiles and nutrition profiles different than the tomato in the grocery store, but hey, did your daughter just get married? Community. You don't talk about that in a supermarket. You'll find that connection here. We encourage people. Although our medical practice is right next to the farm market, you don't have to be a patient of mine to have these community connections. You don't have to be my patient. You can come in and just be the patient of the farmer. You can just, purchase his delicious, beautiful, health-giving food and connect in that way. And with the other customers who are buying the food, because they're all becoming friends. We have potlucks and a growing complement of other offerings here where the community comes and shares experiences. I dream of having a movie series in the summertime. Who knows? Maybe it'll exist next year. We have farm-to-table education classes where anyone can come and learn how to shop in a market and then how to cook and eat healthy plant-based foods. We've had offerings of bread baking classes, how to bake really healthy breads that are a cornerstone of nutrition and just as delicious. We have movement classes here and evaluations on the farm to find out how to move in a way and to build yourself so that as you get older, you don't need to walk with a cane or a walker, and you don't need someone to take care of yourself. You'll be self-sufficient. And I hope next year we will have maybe, the farm will be a gymnasium. Maybe we will have events where you can just come regularly and run through the forests and do these natural movements. I look forward to developing that.
Nice. And what kind of team do you have to help you in these initiatives?
Oh, we have an amazing team. I started off here with the farmer. That was the first person I started with. Today that farmer is Farmer Nora Puglisi. She's the farm manager. We have our amazing field manager, Nick Hodgson, and his cadre of farmers, Jesse and David and Andy, and we have the farm crew. Can never forget about them. And then we have sort of the people on the practice side. Asha Gala, who is our lifestyle director and health and wellness coach, she helped me start my practice on this farm. And she sets the bar for lifestyle excellence. And then we have our whole team in the office. Steph, our office manager, and our scribes. They are part of our Next Gen Physicians program, where we hire people in our practice who want to become physicians someday. And we teach them how to do that within our office. And then they go to medical school and become doctors. Henry and Carly and Tuha are our current crop, our coaches in the office. So the care that's given out is not just based on me, it's based on my team. And intrinsic and very important to that is the scribes who interact with patients. They're like my medical assistants. Steph, the manager, who engages with people. And of course, our coaches. Our coaches, I may say to a patient, oh, you should do this. You should eat plants if you want to lower your cholesterol. But the coaches are the ones that inspire them and show them how to do it in practical terms so that they can be successful, and the coaches hold them accountable to it. And that's, a beautiful thing. Wendy, Asha does that, and Jordana, and Gail. Yeah. So that's our team. And then, of course, we have our board. The board of Ethos Farm to Health, the overall nonprofit umbrella, and our board members, they help to drive the mission forward of what we do.
Yeah. Thanks to Jason, I'm here. Jason,
yeah.
He's one of your board members. I got to interview him at the NHA and then on his beautiful farm too. And it's amazing how much support you get from people like him and Asha and different people.
We wouldn't be here without it.
Yeah. And so that brings me to my next question, and that's, how can people learn more and how can they support you more? Because I really want to see this go as far as it can, man. Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff. Yeah. We do too, and you're one of the reasons why I think we will. You've been a great supporter of us and spending all this time with us and documenting what we do and putting it out there will get us there. Thank you. There are a number of things I would suggest, and they're linked to what I've already said. Support your local farmer. So if you're within driving distance of here, come on a beautiful day to our farm market. Eat the food that can better yourself and our world. Support our farmers. Support this farm. If you feel that you want to move ahead and make yourself healthier, you have that opportunity with our practice. I'm waiting for you to help you as a patient.
That reminds me, on the way here, you learned about 2 new patients that are going to be here tomorrow. And I just loved the smile that just took over your face. It was so beautiful.
Each patient is a new world.
Yeah.
It's a new world.
Yeah.
Each life is a world unto itself.
Yeah.
So it's like I get very excited just when I find someone new who wants to come in. It's very complicated with how do you get an appointment, insurance, whatever. We've made it easy. We have something called a new patient package. And what it is in the medical practice, it's the way everyone enters to become a patient, not necessarily for the rest of your life. It's a trial. It's a trial to see, are we a good fit for you? Maybe I'm not. But during this trial, which is 5 encounters, 2 of them with me, 2 of them with Asha, our lifestyle director, and 1 of them with our beautiful movement assessor, physical therapist, Dr. Phil Lombardo, you will know by the end of this package where you've been in your life from the time you were born, where you are, and you will know your future of where you will go. And you will know how to get there in the best shape and fashion. Because you will leave with that plan. Even if we never see you again, you will know. Internally, you will know from your blood, from markers, you will know from your movements, you will know from talking to us, you will know everything. And you will have this, and you can leave. If you want more of it, you can stay. And I can be your primary doctor for as long as you want. So I like that new patient package because in my book, I've never seen a human being so comprehensively evaluated from a health perspective anywhere that I'm aware of. This is comprehensive. So you have that opportunity. And then you have all this program I just talked about. You know, you don't have to be my patient. You don't have to buy any food. Come for a class. Find out how to bake bread. Come to farm days. Listen to Mary Berry. Listen to an organic farmer. Listen to Peter Singer, you know, as to about the ethics of eating. Just come on a beautiful day in a beautiful Green Valley. Yeah. Just come.
A lot of people, unfortunately, might not be able to drive as far as I have. So I suppose online there's a way to check things out as well.
You can, and if you live in Montana, you know, we do have patients in Montana. We do have patients in Texas. We do have patients in Florida.
Because you do telehealth, I guess?
Well, yeah, they come here. They come here once in a while. They do. And there are things that we can do on remotely. Coaching, which is really the most important way of keeping you on track, is not bound by any, you know, state licensure requirements. What I do is practice medicine, but that's not, and that makes up the bulk of the things that you need to live at a high level of healthy lifestyle.
Now, as far as supporting this amazing work you're doing here, if somebody wants to see that start of a building being rebuilt or whatever, because I want to see that thing.
Yeah. So I think what you're talking about is the Center for Regenerative Living.
Yeah, that building. I want to see that finished.
Well, that's very poignant to us because that was the first building that was put up by the refugees from Europe who came here, the colonists or the settlers. I'm not sure what to call them anymore. It's one of the above. But they came to this land and they took out of the ground the rocks. When they first plowed the ground, the rocks that were getting in the way of the plow, they picked up and they built into that barn. It's from the 1700s. It's in disrepair, but it doesn't mean it can't be regenerated and rebuilt. There are many things that have gone on this farm, from slavery to destruction of the environment to all kinds of things that are anathema to the ideas of food justice and human kindness. But that building that still manages to stand somewhat symbolizes the human spirit and the desire to regenerate. And so we do have a campaign to try and build that into a whole structure, which has a teaching commercial kitchen and space to educate new farmers and medical students to become doctors and community members to be kind to one another and sing and dance and take care of the environment and have a broadcast studio. And it would all be within that old 18th century stone barn that came from the ground.
So can somebody buy a brick?
You can. So what I would advise you to do and hope that you do is go to ethosfarmtohealth.org, and there's a campaign. You can contact us. There's a campaign to rebuild that center so that one day, even if you live in Japan or China, you can come visit it. And you can walk through our orchard on a sunny day and pick an apple. You can, someday. But we need help. We need all kinds of help. We need help from people living in California. We need computer help. We need business help. We need advisory help. We need philanthropic help. Because it takes a lot to rebuild that 18th century barn and to remake our world. So no matter where you live, you can always help us, whether it's through money or through your good deeds or thoughts or your efforts or your professional life.
I want to know, though, I think it would be neat to buy like a brick or a cinder block or, you know, a section of it and spend $100 on maybe a $2 brick, you know,
Yeah.
and know that it's going to help with that. And maybe, you know, I put that brick there. That would be so cool.
Well,
like,
we do have that
yeah.
brick campaign.
Okay.
So
and that's on the
feel
website?
free. You know, I don't control the website or write it. I can't, you know, we had this, it was a specific, that brick campaign to have people buy bricks that would go to, as a component in that stone barn was from last year. I'm not sure that it's written on the website. It was a campaign during last year Farm Days, but we would like more bricks.
Yeah.
So if you don't see it listed there, just contact us. The contact information to get in touch with us is there, and ask about it, and we will accommodate you.
Yeah, because I think that would be a really fun way to get people involved and contributing, I think. You know,
I
just
agree.
me, yeah. How can somebody replicate what you're doing here? Or what can they do to make their communities better? And maybe that may be too big of a question, but you know, it's easy to feel hopeless out there.
It is easy to feel hopeless. Once in a while, I do too. Maybe more than once in a while. But when I do, I change what I'm thinking about, and I cone it down to my daily work of restoration, regenerate, restore. And you know, I do that as a physician, but you don't have to be a doctor to do it. Anyone can do it. And what I'd ask you to do is restore your ecosystem. Restore it every day. Do something. If you live near a farm or you live near a degraded place, there are many degraded places in the world, in the middle of cities, right?
Food deserts and stuff, yeah.
Restore it. And when I'm talking about degraded places, I'm not necessarily talking about land, although it could be land. It could be a community or, you know, an urban area that's degraded. Restore it. Restore the relationships and connections. And if you do that a little bit every day, and if we all do that, all of a sudden we'll live in a beautiful world because we'll be surrounded by kindness, and because that's a kind thing to do. It's an intentional thing. And that's what I would advise you to do. And that's what I do every day.
It could spawn maybe into something like this or something unique to this.
Yeah.
That's as important.
Yeah, exactly. You know, when you're doing something in such a focused manner, you don't have time or the bandwidth to think about nuclear so much, nuclear facilities that may be being developed in Iran or in North Korea, or plastic bags that are floating in a great gyre in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, or the polar bears that don't have any more icebergs to sit on anymore.
Yeah. Those dark place thoughts
things,
derail you.
they can derail you. But if you're kind and you act it
With intent.
for an hour every day, and we all do it, the polar bear will have plenty of ice. There won't be plastic bags in the ocean anymore. And we won't be threatening each other either. So that's the way I think about it. I was talking about this to someone the other day. And I'm going to say this because an important election is coming up. Doctors are famously not supposed to get into politics with patients. That's a cardinal no-no. If patients try to ask me, I change the subject real quick. But this is what I'm going to say. In the last election, the day before election day, I was working in urgent care. The pandemic was raging. We had a lot to demoralize ourselves. I think maybe in urgent care I had 2 dead patients that day. In urgent care, not the emergency room. Someone came in, and election day was the next day. This person asked me, and I was very startled by this question, because no patient had ever asked me this before. And it was someone who was a stranger to me. It wasn't an established patient. It was someone new who had just walked in. It was urgent care. I was just treating them for a problem. And this person said to me, Dr. Weiss, who should I vote for? And for an instant, I didn't know what to do, because I didn't want to tell this man to vote Republican. I didn't want to tell this man to vote Democrat, because I'm not supposed to do that. And after a moment of not being able to answer, I thought of this. And I said, you know what you should do? You should vote for the person who's kindest. And that's it. And I think it still holds true.
Well, thank you so much for your time. You're such a beautiful soul, and I can't thank you enough for this time. And everything
Thank you,
else
Jeff.
you're doing.
Yeah, thank you.
So the first question is going to be your name, title, year you went. Is it safe to say vegan or plant-based? And then, however you want to say it. Name, title, year.
Well, which one do you want? Plant-based or vegan?
If you're fine with saying vegan, because we'll qualify it further what that means.
I don't like the name vegan.
I do.
I am vegan.
Yeah. I do, because to me, what's healthiest for humans is
Here's what I do. I like it for terms of ethical behavior. I do not like it for health reasons. I don't like it.
I think it needs to be.
Because it signals, when a doctor says that, it signals to the patient that they can eat shit. That they may be able to eat shit. Vegan shit, that's why.
Yeah.
But I do like it for terms of compassion and ethical behavior.
Yeah. But to me, humans are animals too, so what's healthiest for the human should be the most vegan. Corporations exploiting it to make processed goods is not.
Well, maybe we can talk. Maybe we can talk about this.
Okay, so let's start.
Well, what do you want me to say?
So for name, title, year you took on this way of eating, and then you could talk about the why. Just be brief, because we got a lot of questions, and just summarize it. The why, what led up to it. You could talk about your father some.
Are you going to be asking me these questions?
Yeah,
or guiding me, or what?
just the first
Do you want me
four.
to-
The first four are just introducing you. So it's just a quick introduction.
And you want me to just talk about all these things?
Yeah,
So,
no, just name, title, year, which is just quick, and then the why that led up to it, and then I'll proceed with the questions.